What's up, everybody? So in this video, we're gonna be doing some questions on the topic membrane transport. So these are all paper 1 or multiple choice IB questions. So let's just get started. The salt concentration inside an animal cell is 1.8%. The salt concentration in the surrounding medium becomes 5%. What will be the likely response? So in these type of questions, you might be thinking, oh, this is complicated, but it's really easy if you just draw out what they're describing here. So let's draw out a little cell here. Here we have a cell, okay? We can see that this is our cell. We don't have any organelles, it's just a very simple cell with a nucleus and a cytoplasm, and we got these molecules inside. They're saying the inside is 1.8%. We don't really care about the specific percentage, it doesn't matter. We just need to know that the inside is less than the outside. The outside is 5%, whereas the inside is 1.8%. So that's all we gotta care about, that the one number is bigger than the other. So the inside, there's less concentration, a lower concentration of these molecules, meaning less for the same amount of water. Now the outside has a lot of these molecules. It's way more concentrated. So what's going to happen is osmosis. So in this case, if the molecule is unable to come in by simple diffusion to even out the two sides, if it can't do that, if this molecule can't move in, then osmosis will happen. So instead, water will leave from the inside where these molecules have a lot of water. They have so much water to share. Instead, now some water is going to leave to the outside to give these molecules some more water, because there is so many molecules here sharing the same amount of water, whereas here it's only 2. So water will leave the cell to the outside to kind of make both sides equal concentration. So that's what happens. It moves to the outside, and by doing so, the cell loses a lot of its water. So it shrinks in a sense. It's like sucking all the air and water out of a bottle. It's going to start shrinking like this. So which option are we going to choose based off this? So the cell is not going to gain water, so we know it's going to lose water. So it's here. The cell will shrink from loss of water. So if you understand osmosis, then this question is fairly straightforward. So again, here I'm not going to explain that much in detail all the concepts. It's just to run over these questions in a brief manner. Okay, so if you don't understand things, make sure to watch my actual teaching videos. Okay, here we got another one. Here they at least gave you a diagram, so you don't have to imagine things. Okay, the diagram is a model of one type of movement across a membrane. We know that there are so many ways molecules can move across a membrane, right? Let's go back here, let me show you. There are so many ways, like osmosis, like we just saw, facilitated, simple, active, endocytosis. There are many ways. So they're saying which way is happening here. So remember, when we think about membrane transport questions, it's very important to think about three things. Okay, you got to think about, does this method need a protein channel or a protein? Does this method require a concentration gradient? And 3, does this method need ATP? If you can say yes or no to each of these, then you should know which method we're talking about. So let's look at this picture. We can see that there's a high concentration of molecules here and a low concentration of molecules here. So this could be the outside of the cell, and this might be the inside of the cell. So we know there's a concentration gradient because the molecule is moving from the high concentration to the low concentration. It's moving down the concentration gradient. So we can put a tick on concentration gradient. Yes, it needs a concentration gradient. Now, if you have a concentration gradient, you automatically do not need ATP because this process happens naturally. No energy is required. It's like when heat moves into your house from the outside where it's warm to into your house where it's cold. It happens by itself. You don't need to make it happen. So when a scenario happens by itself, you don't need ATP. Now lastly, there is this protein. So we can tick protein. So we know this is a passive process. Okay, we know the process that requires a protein and happens down a concentration gradient is facilitated diffusion. Simple diffusion is basically the same, except it only uses the phospholipid bilayer. It doesn't use the protein, this protein at all. So it's going to be B. It's not going to be C because C is the movement of water, not the movement of particles like this. An active transport would be the opposite. The arrow would be pointing the opposite way. The movement from a low concentration to a high concentration. So against the concentration gradient, meaning you do not need a concentration gradient. So that's why our answer is B here. Okay, here we have a definition question. So what is osmosis? So I'm just going to quickly read through them and pick out the right one for you, and then I'll explain why. Okay, it happens to be A. The movement of water through a membrane from a low to high solute concentration. Let me explain. We have this diagram here, right? We used it before in this video. So what happened here? Remember, the outside was very concentrated, the inside was low concentration, and the molecules weren't able to come in because they couldn't pass the membrane, so water instead left. How? And by osmosis. So how did water move? From an area of low solute concentration to an area of high solute concentration through the membrane. So it's going to be A. Because B is saying the movement of solutes, so that's wrong, it's not solute, it's got to be water. So we can automatically eliminate B and D just because of the word solutes. So why is it not C? Because they're saying the movement of water through a membrane from high to low solute. That's wrong, it should be from low to high. Okay, what is the role of protein pumps in active transport? So again, protein pumps are like these things, and they help pump ions from from an area of low concentration to a high concentration. So it basically helps move molecules against their concentration gradient from where it's little to where there's a lot. So basically the opposite of simple and facilitated diffusion. So what is the role of these protein pumps in active transport? To move, it's going to be B, because to move substances across. Across means against. So across means like against. If they said to move substances down a concentration gradient, that would indicate it's not active transport. That would be facilitated or simple diffusion. But because they're saying across, that means like against the concentration gradient. Therefore, we know it is active transport. And that's what the proteins do. So it's not C, because they're saying to produce ATP for energy. With active transport, you don't produce ATP. In fact, you use energy. You actually use energy to do active transport. So produce is the word that's wrong here. And then D, to provide protein for facilitated diffusion. Again, active transport is not related to facilitated diffusion. So it's not, that's why this one is wrong, because of that. Now A, to control whether specific substances enter the cell. Technically it does, but the better answer would be B, because this is specifically saying what it does. Whereas A, this definition can apply to all the kinds of transport. Simple, facilitated, osmosis, like A can apply to basically all of them. All of them that use a protein pump, not just active transport. Because we know a protein pump can be used in facilitated diffusion, right? So it doesn't necessarily just refer to active transport, whereas this one refers to active transport only. Okay, we have one more, I think, for this video. What is the passive movement of particles, such as sodium ions, from an area of high concentration to an area of lower concentration through a protein carrier? So, what are we seeing here? We're basically seeing this scenario. Here we have a membrane. We have the outside of the cell, the inside of the cell, and a phospholipid bilayer. They're saying we're looking at a scenario, the movement of particles, such as sodium, so any particle, from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration through a protein carrier. So automatically what we're going to do is, again, look at this. Do we need a protein carrier? Yes. Do we need a concentration gradient? Yes. Do we need ATP? No, because we have a concentration gradient. So because we have this protein carrier, we know it's not simple diffusion, okay? Because simple diffusion requires no protein. But because we have a concentration gradient, this means it's not active transport, because active transport does not require a concentration gradient. And again, it's not osmosis because we're moving water. We're moving sodium ions. We're not moving water. So it's going to have to be C. Basically, this is the first answer as option A. If you look at option A, we had the same scenario, and it was facilitated diffusion. So that's it for this video. Check out part 2 if you want more questions.